Just left. And the start line was 3 hours ago. If this isn't beautiful, then I don't know what is. That's Mana from aloft.
On the 4th of September, 2022, Kirsten Neuschäfer began a race around the world. 16 sailors entered the race. Only 3 finished it.
Weather's not entirely stable. Good sailing. We're on our way to see if we can find tapir. Heaven forbid, but if I ever had to land up in a life raft with someone else, then he'd be the person I'd want to be in a life raft with.
From moments of terror to moments of unbelievable beauty, this is much more than just a sailing race.
I'm really glad to be here. It's an incredible privilege. I feel really, really blessed by life, by all the friendships, by all the support. And so I don't feel alone out here. I know there are lots of people watching. Yeah, may it be a good trip.
Just over a year ago, I had the opportunity to interview Kirsten Neuschäfer before she set off on a race around the world. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. At the time, Kirsten was in South Africa on board her Cape George 36 Minnehaha. She was preparing to sail to France to reach the start line of the Golden Globe race. The Golden Globe race is one of the toughest sailboat races in the world. Around the globe, non-stop, single-handed, unassisted, on small traditional boats without modern equipment. That means no satellite weather, no GPS, no boat over 36 feet, and no boats designed after 1988. The participants race in some of the toughest conditions in the world, through the infamous Southern Ocean, experiencing towering waves and howling winds, all alone on their small sailboats. As an added challenge, participants must also navigate themselves to 3 points around the globe in order to be interviewed by the race committee and drop off footage taken on board. Although no regular satellite communication is allowed, sailors must send short text updates to race control throughout the voyage. The GGR is a true test for the sailors, but it is also a true test for the boats. They need to be strong enough to withstand months of tough ocean conditions, yet still fast enough to win. And Kirsten is the first sailor to ever compete in the race on a Cape George sailboat. So before the race even began, Kirsten's journey was very interesting to me personally. For the past few years, my husband and I have been refitting a Cape George 36, the same boat that Kirsten planned to enter into the Golden Globe race. It was the first time this type of boat had ever been entered, so there was a big question mark above it. Was it the right choice? And what would Kirsten's journey be able to tell us about our own journey still to come? Now, over a year later, Kirsten has won the race. She set multiple records, rescued a fellow contestant at sea, and inspired the world with her perseverance, courage, and humility.
When you're alone out for a really long time, because we are, after all, sociable creatures, and we need other humans to, in a way, define who we are as well.
So when I got the chance to interview Kirsten again and hear about her journey throughout the race, you can imagine just how excited I was.
Hi.
Kirsten, hi. Yeah.
How's the boat coming along?
Pretty good. It's getting there. We might launch this year, but we'll see. We'll see.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me. I feel like in our first interview, we told the story of who you are and the vast amount of preparation and prior experience that went into this whole race before it even started. And now I would love to hear the story of the race from your perspective on board. So when the start of the race finally came around, did you feel prepared, or was it a mad dash to the start?
Was still a mad dash to the start, not because I didn't have what I needed for myself personally. You know, I knew what I needed. By the time I got to Europe, I was perfectly happy with the performance of the boat. But there was a whole lot of stuff we still needed to do in terms of the race organizers. Like we had to do safety checks, and then there were lots of media events, and we were on a public dock, which was lovely in a way. It was lovely to be able to interact with, you know, the people that were so enthused and that were going to be following you on the race. But on the other hand, you're into your last 3 weeks before the start of a really big journey, and all you want to do is really focus.
Now, this is Kirsten's boat. Sadly, I doubt whether we're going to get into Kirsten's boat. She's been really busy trying to cope with not only her own preparation, but massive interest by the media, and she's been doing really well, but she's still got lots to contemplate. And I think she's spending everything with family and friends at the moment. But this is a beautiful Cape George 36. Watch this space. It's a fast boat on paper and for real.
So I found a lot of all these media and social and other events quite distracting. And it was a crazy sort of vibe towards the end. So when I finally got over the start line after that mad rush, it was going from this stress and this rush and the crowds and everything to, I'm back out here. Here we go again. I feel at home. I've just done 2 long trips with my boat, and it doesn't feel strange to me to set out again on that journey, except knowing that this time it's going to be about 4 times as long as the other 2 trips I've done.
Just left. It's now 7 o'clock, so the start line was 3 hours ago. And it was an absolutely amazing feeling to see so many people out there.
But then once the gun gets fired and you start getting distance from the other boats and from the press boats and all that, it's a great sense of relief, like, oh, I can breathe again. So yeah. We all looked at the weather forecast as much as we could right up until the last minute. So I was kind of aiming for the Spanish coast on sort of a close-hauled course, the best possible, fastest course that I could sail. So I started off with a gentle beat, and then there was a moment of having no wind, and then the wind filled in a bit stronger, and there had been quite a big depression outside of the Bay of Biscay, so we were expecting conditions to get rough, as they do in the Bay of Biscay. But I don't have much local knowledge of the Bay of Biscay, and I sailed straight into a trap off the Spanish coast where there just was no wind. And that was like a first very frustrating start for me of being becalmed there. And I could see the other boats, because the fleet stayed quite close together in the beginning. I could see them just a few miles offshore moving, and there I was stuck and I wasn't moving at all. So it was a bit of a tough start, not because of the roughness of the sea, but because of the getting becalmed.
Well, I imagine that must be really difficult, because I remember from our first conversation, this race is always about more than winning, of course. It's such a massive journey, but you did go into it with a healthily competitive attitude. That bumpy start, I mean, it's such a long race, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything for the length of the race to have the first few days not go as planned, but how did that bumpy start sort of affect the mood?
It plays a bit on your morale when you're right at the beginning of the race and you really feel you're off to a bad start. First, it really frustrated me, and then when I got offshore, away from the Bay of Biscay, I just decided to go quite far offshore, and I think I probably went further offshore than anyone else did at that point. And then I got away from the fleet. I couldn't see them anymore. That too was a great relief, because I realized then, listen, I want to be out on my own. Jeremy, I'd still spoken to him, and he said, don't worry too much about it. We all have to race our own race. That he still said to me on VHF, and that was very true. And once I stopped worrying about it, I stopped caring where the other boats were and how far ahead of me they were. then I started to really enjoy the sailing.
We're in a little bit of a school here. It's good sailing.
Once I got offshore, I got the spinnaker up in the lighter winds.
Weatherfax is busy printing, but presumably there's going to be nothing of extreme interest. And I'm busy getting the spinnaker ready. Had to jibe, so now I've got to get the wool back on it. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, here we go. Up onto the bowsprit. This is quite a nice perspective of the boat from up here.
And I just remember really enjoying the sailing. And I got to the right side of the lower pressure, so I was starting to pick up favorable winds, and that's when I really started to enjoy it. Well, I enjoyed before what happened as well, but you get away from the traffic and you get away from the other competitors, and yeah, it just felt good.
Yeah, it's quite a pretty evening.
So in order to approach that first gate, you had to find it using nothing but celestial navigation and your charts and your compass. How confident were you right at the start that you were exactly where you thought you were?
I mean, right at the start, that was the thing that unnerved me a little bit, is leaving without a GPS, especially because I was going to be heading for the Spanish coast. So the first stretch I basically just did on dead reckoning because there was hardly any time to take sights, and I knew I'd see the mountains. Like, I knew the Spanish coast has relatively tall mountains, so that you would spot and probably be able to spot certain peaks that would allow you to pinpoint your position. So that was actually okay. But then approaching the Canaries, it was a bit of a break in the rhythm because it's quite soon after the start that you have to go into that gate. And I would have preferred just staying offshore. And I knew I was getting close by the time I was close, but it was very hazy. So I couldn't see land at all. And eventually there was shipping because, you know, you were getting to larger ports in the Canaries Islands and stuff like that. So I think eventually I hailed a ship and I asked them what their position was, from which I could then, deduce my position fairly accurately. And then it became night. And that's the first I actually saw land because it was so hazy you couldn't see land at day. But once it became night and the land lights went on and, you know, cell phone towers and stuff were switched on, then I could see where I was. And then it was okay. And I think that's the thing about approaching land, depending on what land, and not like Snares Island or Bounty Island, which are totally abandoned islands and unlit. But, you know, if you're approaching a place where there are people living in relatively large population, there's also going to be some shipping of some other sort. And that's always a good way to just verify your position if you're in the haze and stuff like that.
So as you were approaching that first gate then in the Canaries, what were your thoughts and how did you feel?
Well, it was breaking my rhythm a little bit. So I wasn't feeling the usual joy that I do of a landfall, like you would when you're cruising or something and you know you're going to go into port, you're going to go and grab some nice food and a beer and you're going to just be happy that you made it there. But this felt more like, this is really an interruption to me right now. I'm in my groove and I want to stay out there. And then Guy de Bro was just ahead of me. I could see his lights and I could hear him call race control. So I knew that's him who's just ahead of me. So I was just following him in, but then they were obviously interviewing him for the 40 minutes or whatever it is compulsory time, you have to stop. So I kept my distance because I didn't want to be on top of, I didn't want to get too close to him at night and then have to maneuver around him. So as a result of that, I didn't exactly know where the mark was, the inshore mark that we had to pass, because they were really busy with him and they kept on saying it's that little light there, but I'd seen a different light. So by the time he'd moved off, when it was my turn to pass through the gate, I still had to tack backwards and forwards to get round the mark, which was really irritating me in that moment because my boat wasn't rigged at the time for tacking around the cans, you know. It was so I just wanted to get through the gate and get going again. So I think my overall sort of vibe when they were interviewing me there must have been of I'm relatively irritated. You're wasting my time right now. I don't want to get offshore again. So yeah.
Fair enough.
And the boat's, nothing's really a drama, eh?
No, nothing.
Touch wood.
For the boat.
Yeah.
The boat would probably be fine without me.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What do you say? I mean, yeah. I wouldn't be too. You know. Yeah. You've been doing pretty well, really. Everyone had their challenges. You know. So.
How were you feeling, I guess, about your performance in the race? Was that initial frustration of Biscay sort of behind you at that point?
Because we're still with me when I went through the gate.
Yeah.
Apart from having my rhythm broken,
Yeah.
I still was kind of irritated about having had a bad start and knowing that certain people were already, you know, well more than 24 hours ahead of me. But then it was nice speaking to Guy. I had a really nice chat to him once we both left the gate, and he'd gone to the east of Port Townsend and I'd gone to the west. And then, of course, I heard him call a mayday because he'd run aground. And I felt so awful for him. But really, like, I just felt awful. Firstly, because he's a kind of fun person to have on a race. You know, he was saying funny things to ship captains and stuff. So if you were in range of him, there was always something entertaining to listen to. And he was kind of like his performance was similar to mine. He'd also gone offshore. I think his boat in some ways was quite similar to mine. So he was a nice sort of competitor to be competing against, if you know what I mean. So I was really gutted when he was out of the race.
So this is for you, Guy. I'm really, really sorry about what happened to you last night. And I wish I could have helped. I really, really wish I could have helped. And I really miss your presence in this race because you were always so cheerful and so motivating and so encouraging. And I was pretty surprised, pretty happy to see your stern from so close last night. And yeah, like I say, I'm really, really sorry that this has happened to you because it could just as easily have happened to me. I know that. I know how quickly these things go and how easily they can happen. And I've had so many close shaves in my life. So anyway, you'll be on this race in fourth with me at least, that's for sure. And I hope you're doing okay. I wish I could give you a big hug and have a nice stiff Cuba Libre with you so that we can laugh about it again. And there's about 5 knots of wind, maybe not more. And it's we're sailing as close to it as we can. We're almost on a southerly course. And here I am on one of my favorite places of the boat. Calm conditions right up front here on the bowsprit. Yeah, I still can't believe what happened last night. Poor guy. And I'm sure thinking of him.
me. And then I thought to myself, I need to pull myself together and stop moping around. I need to count my lucky stars that it didn't happen to me and be glad that I'm in the race and just enjoy myself. And from that point on, I really think I started to enjoy myself more and more and get more and more into it and more into the feeling of great satisfaction, feeling of being incredibly privileged and feeling a deep sense of gratitude for being out there on that race.
After that first gate, how were you feeling about the boat itself? What was working? What wasn't working? How was the actual sailing going?
And the sailing was going really well, and I felt really positive. I felt like a really positive uplift. We had, after the gate, we had a couple of days of being becalmed, and it's the calmest I've ever seen anything. It was like being at anchor, and there were some really beautiful moments.
Well, this is taking calms to new extremes. Absolutely like a mirror. Yep, that's it. Dead calm.
But I knew then already this is weird because the Canaries is usually quite a windy belt, so there's something coming.
Weather's not entirely stable. There's quite a bit of rain around and the wind's quite shifty, but we're making good headway and it's a good opportunity to catch some water. I've set up my rain catchment bucket. I've used about 30 litres in 25 days, I think it is now, maybe 32 litres. And we're about 130 miles away from Cape Verde. Wind seems to be filling in now. Last night was another slow night, but I'm really enjoying myself. I'm enjoying the sailing. I'm enjoying the celestial navigation. I'm loving my solitude. I'm enjoying the tropical heat, the humidity. Yeah, it's good. It's all around good.
And then we did get storm warnings. We got it from race control, but we also got it from the ships saying, there's something like a tropical storm moving between Senegal and the Cape Verdes. And are you guys aware of it? And there was a lot of talk of the storm. And I must say, it honestly didn't bother me in the least because I'd not sailed that, well, I had sailed that stretch down, but I was more familiar with sailing that stretch up from South Africa to Europe. And I know that the storms, when they develop on the African coast, they're storms. They're not hurricanes. So the talk of hurricane and everything didn't particularly bother me. And, the course to steer as clear as possible from the storm was to go as south as possible. But at some point, I just felt confident that I'm not bothered by the storm. It's in its infancy. It's coming off the coast. It's not going to have picked up too much speed just yet. So I started heading further offshore because it was a faster, more comfortable angle. And then the storm came through and it was kind of refreshing. Like it wasn't a heavy storm, but it was a nice tropical storm where you had this thorough downpour and lightning, and it was just lots of energy. It was a good experience.
So how did you actually prepare the boat for the storm? Did you do anything specific or?
No. I was so relaxed about that particular storm that I reefed down to third And I was at one stage, because it was a bit of a beat, I was beating a little bit into it, which made it a little bit uncomfortable, but I was reefed down to third and I had the staysail out, and that's how we were cruising along, eventually cracking off onto more of a close reach than a beat because it was just getting a bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, when the big squalls were coming through, I was collecting water as well because I thought this was the ideal opportunity to start filling up my tanks. What was sad during and after the storm was the amount of land birds that had been blown offshore and that were looking to land somewhere. So I had, at one stage, I had about, 10 birds on board, and there must have been 5 different species of bird. You can't really help them because they need to get back to land, and they're going to sit and catch their breath and then fly off, and you can just hope for the best for them.
And last night, a very beautiful bird landed on board. I wish I could help it, but I don't really know what to do.
After the storm, you get into the trades, and then it's a lot of sailing with the light wind sails like Jenicas and stuff like that.
So I think that's the start of the Southeast trade. Might be wrong, but I think it is. At this stage, we're about 220 odd miles away from Tristan to Kuna, and still a little ways to go towards the fairest of the capes. It's funny how one just craves things from home from time to time. Good thing I took a bit of a supply of millipap with from South Africa when I left.
And just enjoying myself. I was reading a lot. I always read quite a lot, but I read less in the tropics because I was actually spending more time outside just enjoying it, being out there. And also knowing that once I get across the equator, I'm going to have to start beating. So then it's not going to be as comfortable anymore. I didn't write a diary or a journal as such, but I wrote to people. So I wrote a lot of letters. So every time I went through a gate, I had a whole lot of letters to send through, unfortunately many of which went missing and never actually reached their recipients, but I did. But those that did get their letters, I might at some stage ask them if I can borrow the letters back so that I could see what kind of thoughts I was writing down at the time.
Were you listening to music? Because I know you had like cassette tapes and stuff, right?
Yeah, I was, and actually some of the tunes I really got into, I guess because I had them easily accessible. I had this whole case of cassettes, but it wasn't right accessible. I'd stored it somewhere where it was out of my way. But I had a few loose cassettes of Lenny Gallant lying around because he'd given me some in Prince Edward Island. And I really got into his music because some of them were like really nautical themed songs about ghost ships and all sorts of stuff. And I enjoyed listening to the lyrics. And how it is sometimes you listen to music that you don't know that well, but it grows on you. And the more you listen to it, the more you're enjoying it for whatever reason. So it's kind of cool because I know if I listen to some of those songs again, all those memories are going to come flooding back into my head of the time I was listening to it out at sea,
All right, what a view. Absolutely spectacular. So the progress is slow, but we're also out here to enjoy the beauty of the ocean. And if this isn't beautiful, then I don't know what is. That's Manaha from aloft. Okay, well, everything's looking good. Can't see any chafe, I can't see any cracks, no split pins that look damaged. So on that note, I'll probably head back down again. There was a lot of phosphorescence in the water last night, more than I've seen in a while. And this morning I stuck my hand in the water and the water was considerably warmer. And I've seen southern right whales this morning, a couple, maybe 3, and I saw a shark. I don't know what kind of shark, but I know a shark dorsal fin when I see one. And yeah, it's a lively spot at any rate.
I mean, I slept plenty. I'd always have a thorough good siesta in the afternoons, and then I'd be up quite a bit in the night because I enjoy watching the night, especially in the tropics when the weather's warm, and especially sometimes because it's just so hot in the day, it's easier to just go and hide it away below and then be up at night. But I had more than enough sleep. The thing being that I slept so much that I never slept deeply because I was always well rested. So when I slept, it was a light sleep. So I would wake up easily, just because I wanted to log my course over ground and whatever the trailing log mileage was logging for the navigation aspect. I was feeling great. I was feeling one with the boat. I was eating well. I was sleeping well. I was enjoying the sailing. I was very happy. I felt like I've got everything under control. I always had lists in my mind of, okay, next time there's no wind, I need to check the barnacle situation again, or next time there's rain, I need to top up, or there's a little job I have to do here, there's a little bit of chafe on that line. So there were little jobs. I always had a little list in my mind of this and that, the next thing I have to do, and I felt like I was on top of it at all times.
Getting the weather forecast from Cape Town Radio, that's the best weather I've been able to get information up until now.
Which may be accompanied by individual waves 1.5 to 2 times higher. These estimates of winds and waves do not take into account the enhancing effects of the Agulhas current off the South African east coast.
So we've got some real southern ocean conditions here. Fog, light rain, nice big rolling swell, which is pushing us along really nicely. There must have been a low that passed quite far to the south because we had some northwest, west, northwest, then swung over west, southwest. Now it's going south and southeast, which is kind of nice because we're now on a fetch, but we're surfing the nice running swell that's coming up from behind. The only thing is obviously the sun isn't visible, and I didn't manage to get the best of sun sights yesterday, and I'm just kind of starting my ascent northwards towards the Cape, so I'm hoping to get a few decent sights so that I can pinpoint my position more accurately than just running on dead reckoning right now. But anyway, it's all part of the challenge. After a bit of a frustrating night of the wind shift with a lull in between and relatively confused sea, we're moving along nicely again now.
So as you were approaching Cape Town, which I know is obviously a place of great significance for you, describe that moment as you're approaching your home, ostensibly.
Well, it started off a little bit frustrating again because I was becalmed again, not far from Cape Town.
So yeah, we're really close to land. I think if I hadn't been so close to land, I might have just furled all the sail away and just bobbed around waiting for the wind to come back. But now I can see land and I want to get there. It's one of those situations, so close and yet still so far. It's probably about 30 miles still to go, and we're probably not doing much more than about 3 knots. Fortunately the swell's pushing us along, but at 3 knots that could still be a good 10 hours to cover this little bit of distance, unless a little bit of breeze comes through later on. Not sure, from the radio forecast it didn't sound like there was much more wind forecast for today, so we'll just bob along and see what happens.
And I knew there were going to be people waiting for me. Like, I knew, for example, that my parents probably would have driven the 700 k's from Port Elizabeth up to Cape Town to wave to me as I passed the gate, and I knew everyone's just going to be sitting around waiting for me.
There's a sleeping seal. Don't even know if he's seen us yet. Oh shame, poor little thing. Didn't mean to give him a fright. The beauty of the water around the Cape.
You see land, it's fun, there's shipping, everything else. Then it became dark, then you see all the familiar landmarks. And then I was approaching and I was sailing under spinnaker. And first I didn't have wind and it didn't look like it was going to fill nicely. And then the wind came in and I was actually cruising towards Cape Town at quite a speed. And then a speedboat, first a sailboat came up with someone I knew on board. And he's like, hey, go Kirsten. And then a speedboat came up and I couldn't see who it was. So I said, who is it? And I heard my friend Manuel with a Portuguese accent saying, hey, it's Manny, my child. And then I knew he's with my parents and everyone else on board as well. So it was a lot of joy. It really energized me to a large degree, and it was the most beautiful night. It was kind of calm. It was almost full moon. It was a moonlit night, and there were whales all over the show. So it was really very special.
I can only imagine what sort of feeling that would be, to be so close to your hometown and to know that you're doing this huge, incredible endeavor that so many people that you love have come to support you on from, it sounds like 700 kilometers away. What a beautiful moment.
It was really lovely, but it was very difficult leaving.
Yeah.
And, my mother was right there. I was talking to her, but I couldn't even give her a hug,
Mm-hmm.
So it had its difficulties as well. For me, that was like Lanzarote. I was happy to get going again. Hobart, would have loved to have gone ashore and explored, but Cape Town was especially difficult because it was such a familiar ground, and it's so strange to sail your sort of standard passage from A to B for more than 60 days and not go ashore, especially when it's your own home.
Okay, welcome to Cape Town. You know all about it. Okay, just dial up and then put it up, just soften it down. We're going to get the lights right. Soften it. That's about it. Oh, that's it. Just hold it there and then keep it there. Yeah, just keep it lit up. So good to see us. Good to see you got your sea boots on.
Oh yeah, best grip.
Yeah, exactly. So big smiles. You feeling good?
Yeah, feeling good for sure.
You look good, and the boat seems good. You're not reporting any issues, so you're happy?
I'm happy. I'm happy. I've got no issues with the boat so far. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling good. So.
Yeah, it looks good. So, how do you feel now heading down deep south and across to, towards Cape Horn? Like it's your home, but just try and express it to us.
Well, I think there's always a feeling of trepidation, anxiety heading down that way. I know I've just got the easy part behind me now, the first easy leg, but I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Oh, more people! Light them up! Hello! Light them up! We better light them up. Put it on bright. We got some revelers here. Yes, I'm not sure who they are, but they're obviously big fans.
Hey, thanks for coming out.
Sapers. What's your daily routine? Like the routine that
Yeah, well, I get up and the very first thing I do is I set my watch, my wristwatch and my ship's clock, because they lose about 15 seconds every day. And first thing in the morning I get the best SSB time signal.
Yeah.
And then I'll wait for the sun to rise high enough to make it worth taking a sight. And while I'm waiting, I'll have coffee and some breakfast cereals. And then I'll take my sight, and then I'll do a little routine, walk around the boat, check that everything's fine, that there's no chance, that nothing's broken. And then if there's nothing much to do, I'll go and read.
Yeah.
Until it's about noon time, and then I'll take another sight. I'm supposed to be sailing the boat as fast as I possibly can, whereas on a delivery or a charter, it's not about speed, so I'm enjoying the performance factor of it as well, really trying to tweak the boat and make her move as best as possible.
So you're really pushing it. You're not just cruising and letting the boat do the work.
Sometimes I push it, but other times if I really don't feel like it, then I'll put a bit of cruising time in between as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about. You know when it's time to go, and then you know when it's time to back off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do want to enjoy it. I don't want to be out there suffering the whole time and tweaking sails.
We're getting a bit ahead here. Okay. All right, so we're going to just pull away a bit and leave you to your other spectators here. It's really good to see you. It's really good to see you happy. A lot happier than Lanzarote.
Yeah, I was being a bit melodramatic.
No. Look, I got to tell you, it's a mind game, as you know, and some of the other entrants have been having real challenges. Don't worry.
Yeah,
real challenges.
It really is a mind game. When I decided not to care anymore about where the others were, it changed things for me just like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could, I'd give you a big hug. So would a few thousand other people. You've got a lot of people following. So keep up the good work and sail safe, and we'll see you in Cape Town soon, eh?
So you're setting out with perhaps a bit of joy and sadness, I suppose.
Very mixed, because then I left and the boat tacked itself for whatever reason. I wasn't paying attention, so it tacked back inshore, and then I thought, well, if we're on this tack, let's just stay on this tack. And then I got totally becalmed.
Last night, as I left the photo gate, I had whales come up right next to the boat in the moonlight, in the calm. It was really beautiful. The only thing is now I'm becalmed and I'm not able to get away. But therefore I'm experiencing all this beautiful marine life, and I get to see this beautiful coastline for a little bit longer. But now that I've left, well, I haven't really left because I'm still bobbing around here, but now that I'm, so to say, on my way again after just waving at them briefly, I feel lonelier than I have during the whole trip.
There were whales, dolphins, and seals around the boat. To have 3 species like that around you simultaneously is really quite special. And the backdrop of Table Mountain behind, with the light, the daylight starting to light it up, it was really beautiful. And took a while for the breeze to establish itself consistently, but then once it did, I got onto a beat, or as good a beat as this boat likes sailing, and then I just stayed on the beat. And it was a bit rough and a bit wet and everything, but there was nothing particularly bad or uncomfortable or anything about it.
So we're almost on the longitude of Cape Agulhas, but not quite. And we're surfing along pretty nicely here. Of course, on a camera one never really sees quite how big the waves are. They're not huge, but they're pushing us along nicely.
I was quite happy. It was just a stable tack where I didn't have to do much, and I was moving. I just kept on, tacking south and hoping I'd get around Cape Agulhas. And then when I did get further south, I got back into the westerlies, and I had a couple of days of really nice westerlies. And then the wind started shifting all over the show, and then the sea state was unpleasant because I knew I'm sitting in a current, so the current's causing the sea state to be very unpredictable. So it was a moment where I thought, this is a place I want to leave as quickly as possible.
Swell from all sorts of directions, and it's really chunky and lumpy, and the bows crashing into swell coming head on. We're on a course about due east at the moment.
On this leg of the journey was the rescue of Tapio from the life raft. How did you first get that call? Who did you get it from?
Well, we've got YB3 trackers, and we had to have, we have the one that's fixed to the boat that gave our position all the time, but we also had another one that the race organizers used to inform us of any important events, like, going to the assistance of someone else, or really severe weather, or anything, or media request. So basically that was their channel to communicate with us. And an alarm goes off, then a message has come through. So that's what happened. The alarm went off that tracker. I went and looked into it, and I got I think it was about 3 messages in one go. So I knew already, here's a problem. The messages have not come through when they were sent. They've come through with a delay. Mm-hmm. And then I read the first message, said Tapio's EPIRB has gone off. The second message said it is confirmed Tapio's boat is sinking, something to that effect. And the third message said Tapio is now in his life raft, and his boat has sunk. So I read the 3 messages. I switched on my satellite phone. I phoned race control because I knew I'm most likely the closest person to him because we were so close when we passed the Cape Town photo gate. And I said, can I help? And they said, yes, you're the closest to him. You're closer than anyone else at the moment on the planet to him. So, can you please help? And then I said yes. And in that moment, I didn't care about the race at all anymore. I ripped open my grab bag. I got the GPS out. I fired up my engine. I started motoring. It's like, well, no, I don't really care what happens anymore as long as I get to Tapio, because you don't want to be on the Southern Ocean in a life raft, and you don't really want to think of the fact that someone else is.
Okay, it's early morning. Sun has just risen. And we're on our way to see if we can find Tapio. We're about 18 nautical miles away. So hopefully we'll get to him real soon now.
I think from the time his boat sank underneath him to when I got to him was about 24 hours. So it started off where I motored a little bit at first because I didn't have much wind, but the wind filled in really, really quickly. And then I just pushed the boat as fast as I could, and it was a perfect point of sail for Minnehaha. It was some angle just forward of the beam, and she was flying. And I was up on the helm all night because I didn't want to sleep and then go off course. So I was steering with the hydro van simultaneously, and we were keeping the absolute most exact course that we could. And then, it was actually quite a beautiful sunrise. The front passed, so I had to change all my sails from going from that forward of the beam angle to sailing almost dead downwind. And then eventually Tapio called me up on the VHF and said, Minnehaha, I could see you. And then I started looking for him, but for the life of me, I couldn't see him because it was the sun had risen and the sun was kind of behind him, so it was blinding me. I could see absolutely nothing. And he even fired off a flare, and I couldn't see the flare. And I really only managed to see him when I was really close to him. So it was an eye-opener to me, just how difficult it is to see something on a rolling ocean, especially at daylight. He didn't have a smoke flare, which would probably have helped. And how difficult it must have been for those folk who had to do rescues when they didn't have GPSs and exact GPS positions, because, I had his exact position and I could pinpoint him down to the finest, so I could ultimately find him.
So when you got him on board, was he, it seemed like he was doing okay. What was the scene
fine.
like? Yeah.
It was a huge lesson for me. I learned a hell of a lot out of it, and that is about being positive. Because if my boat had sunk beneath me, my beloved boat, I would have been crying my eyes out for many reasons, because my boat would be gone. I would have lost everything on board that was on the boat, and I would have been out of the race, and that would have really devastated me, I think, knowing myself as I do. And yet here he was being incredibly positive. He was laughing, he was joking. He was still on his life raft before he came on board, and he said, pass me a scrape. I'll scrape a few barnacles off your stern here while I'm down here, And then he came aboard, and I gave him a big hug because I was just really relieved that he was on board. And he was so positive. He was just so positive. I said, hey, should we celebrate this with a shot of rum? And he said, sure, bring it on, So I will, next time I'm feeling grumpy and down and I don't know whatnot about something that's not going 100% my way, I'm going to remember how Tapio reacted in the face of some pretty dramatic and, shall I say, traumatic event that he just lived through.
So now he's on the ship on his way to China. I hope that he'll relax. I chatted to the captain on the VHF a little bit as they were passing me, and they've got a 32-day trip to China, and the captain sounded really nice. Heaven forbid, but if I ever had to land up in a life raft with someone else, then he'd be the person I'd want to be in a life raft with.
So from all of that excitement, then Tapio gets onto the other boat and you continue on your way. How was that leg of the journey?
Yeah, it took me a few minutes to really register what had happened with Tapio and everything. I kind of had to debrief myself in my own mind. And it was a calm night, so I didn't really have much to do other than catch up on a bit of sleep. And then I was straight back into racing mode. It's like, here we go, give it our all and everything again. And actually from then on, it went a little bit better for me, because up until Tapio's rescue, I was getting becalmed quite a lot and I was getting quite frustrated. And it just went from good to better. And then it wasn't too long, I was out of the exclusion zone area and I could start dipping south, which is when I really started enjoying myself, because I knew now there's no limit stopping me from finding the optimal wind south of Australia. And then I did. And I had some lovely, lovely days of just fantastic sailing, and somewhere knowing I'm catching up to Simon, you know. So it felt good. It felt really good. But then, of course, I approached Hobart, which was also exciting. It was lovely seeing land, discovering land, all that kind of thing, as it always is when you do it with a sextant. And getting into the bay was a bit of a mission because there wasn't much wind and all that. But, you know, suddenly you see this beautiful backdrop of a place you've never seen in your life before, Tasmania. And there are people that you don't know, which was the difference to Cape Town. There were people I knew there, but now there were people I didn't know that had come out in their boats to cheer me on, and it does a lot for the morale, you know. And then there was Don getting dressed like Father Christmas and all that sort of things. It was a very, very memorable moment.
On one side, I imagine that some of that human interaction after so long being alone could be nice, but with that human interaction, there's also, you know, the lights and the camera. And I know that you're not necessarily someone who gravitates to being in front of a camera as your first choice. What did that feel like for you? I mean, of course, it's something you sign up for when you decide to do this race, but what was that like?
Yeah, you know, I made peace with it. I didn't necessarily like it, but I made peace with it because I realized it's the only way they can mediarize the race. And it's also the only way that people can follow. And the race wouldn't happen if people weren't following. And I realized that even more in retrospect once I'd finished the race, just how much it meant to people and how much they were following and how much every little bit of interaction fed them in terms of their imagination of what we were living through. So it was an important aspect. And then I must say with Don and Jane, they're quite casual, so you see them at a photo gate and it doesn't feel like the camera's full on you, because Jane's filming with her iPhone in the background and Don's fumbling around with his microphone. So it feels very relaxed. It feels fun. It's always fun chatting to Don because he's a very positive energy. You know, he's always very enthused and smiling and everything else.
How you feeling? How you feeling?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
What a Christmas.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So you look fantastic coming in.
Oh, cool.
And I know you smile a lot, but you didn't stop smiling since you got here.
Oh, no, I know. I'm in a great mood. And this place is stunning. I'm just mind blown by how beautiful it is here, and these eucalyptus forests and everything. So
yeah, obviously the boat looks good. Is it good?
It's good.
Yeah.
I don't have any issues. Minor things, you know, a little bit of chafe here and stuff like that, but standard wear really, so everything's good.
Yeah. Your food and everything, you're still happy? You're enjoying the food, or is it getting?
Yeah, I'm actually quite enjoying it. I've got my routine of what I eat, but I didn't take enough coffee, which really irritates me because I like my cup of coffee in the morning, but it's not going to break the trip.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
But even before the cameras came, there were people cheering me on who didn't have cameras. They were just out there saying "Go Kirsten," and there were people who'd made signboards saying "Go Kirsten" and stuff like that. You think, wow, it's Christmas Day. You know, people could be at home with their families enjoying themselves, but they've made the effort to come out here in their boats just to say, hey, we're watching you and you go for it. And it does a huge lot for your morale. So on the one hand, again, the gates interrupt your rhythm. They inconvenience you by you having to find land and be alert and all this kind of stuff. And then you get becalmed and all that stuff. So there's a lot of inconvenience about the gates. But there's also a lot of energy that you take out of the gates, and there's a lot of energy that the people watching take out of the gates. So once you make peace with it, you just go there and you enjoy it. Thanks for coming!
Oh, that's Sandy and Co. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also gave you a chance to send letters and stuff, which gave you a motivation to write letters. And it made the race more interesting. I mean, because you'd have to approach these gates and you'd have to do, you know, your more accurate celestial nav and actually find the land and navigate into these bays and stuff like that. So it made it more challenging, and it was an interesting part of the challenge. So I, you know, they're okay. Maybe just not too many, but there's definitely space for some gates on a race like this.
All right, so we'll let some lines go, and What we'll do, we'll take the springs off and then let the bow go first. Just let it fold back. So.
Thanks. Well, you enjoy the rest of your Christmas.
You enjoy the rest of yours.
Thank you.
Bow line just forward of the mark.
Land is kind of disappearing in the distance and in the haze. I can still see it, but it was fun going into Storm Bay, and it was a memorable Christmas, and I was kind of sad to leave. Sad and glad because I'm still on the mission and I'm still on the trip and I'm still enjoying the sailing, but sad because it looked like a really nice place with really good people. There were boats out there to cheer me on, and there was a rowboat, and there was even a swimmer who swam out to the boat just to, wish me well, and those things go a long way when you're alone out for a really long time, because we are, after all, sociable creatures, and we need other humans to, in a way, define who we are as well. So it was really cool, and I was really grateful to all the people who came out, and it was nice seeing Don and Jane again, and it really made my day that Don was dressed up like Santa Claus. So it's been really good, and I'm sorry to leave. Looks like it'd be a really nice place to explore, but there we have it. We're on our way again, and soon we'll get back into the routine of things.
After Australia was basically the biggest uninterrupted leg of the journey. Was that something you were really looking forward to simply get into the rhythm of the boat?
Yeah, I think so, because even though there was no stopping, there was still land, there were still milestones to reach. So, there was Cape Horn, which was the big one, but there was also New Zealand and getting past Snares Island, leaving it to starboard, and Bounty Island and all that. So there was still the chance of seeing land. But what was becoming an increasing concern of mine was the barnacles.
Yeah, about the barnacles, I scraped off as many of them as I could, and I kind of was hoping to get around the Horn as quickly as possible and back up into warmer waters of the Atlantic, out of Great White Territory as well. But I don't really like staying in the water for too long. I was probably in the water for about 2 hours today.
You're not allowed scraping barnacles within 200 miles of the Australian coastline. And it was going to be pretty similar for New Zealand. So I knew at some point I just have to bite the bullet and dive and do some scraping. But I was procrastinating about it because the water was cold. I didn't feel like it. But then a couple of occasions I wanted to go overboard. There were little sharks on the stern. Just cute little sharks, but it didn't make me want to dive and scrape barnacles. So I was using every excuse like, I saw a wee little shark there, I'm not going to dive today. Until I looked overboard one day and I saw like thousands of wee little goose barnacles on the hydrovane rudder, and I'm like, it's getting bad. I'm going to have to dive. And I tried to sleep that night, and every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was these long, stalky barnacles. And I did what I had to resolve the problem. And even though it was a pain, it felt good. It's like, it gave me something to do. I came out off almost hypothermic, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like I've made progress. I discovered that it's much, much better to have a bit of wind when you're doing it, because you can heave to and you can keep pressure in your sail, and the boat doesn't move around at random as it does if you've got absolutely no wind. So you can scrape on the lee side. And so that was a discovery. And then I knew, okay, tomorrow when I've warmed up and I do the other side, or whenever, I maybe only did it a week later because the wind filled in. So you obviously can't have too much wind, but ideal conditions is just a light bit of breeze. And then I had at least five lines tied under the keel, so that I could work my way from the front right to the back.
The boat itself actually seemed to be having no problems. I mean, were you quite pleased with the refit that you had done and with the design of the boat? Because it seemed to be holding up quite well.
I was very happy. There were a few things that I would have changed, and some of them were like, one of the things was I would have had a main sail that reefs higher, that pulls the boom up higher as you're reefing it. But that was really more related to the sail than the refit of the boat. So I was comfortable on the boat. I was at one with the boat.
That's an amazing place to be, because I know that in the Southern Ocean you also did experience some really rough weather, and at one point you threw some warps out behind the boat. Can you describe that weather and how you heard about it, how you prepared for it?
Yeah, well, we were at the time, all of us were in contact with a registered maritime shore station, but it's actually a private individual who runs the station. He played by the rules. He never gave any person any information that he didn't give anyone else, and the only information he really gave us was government-issued weather bulletins. You know, when you're in the Southern Ocean, you know that the weather's coming up from behind you when you're sailing from west to east. So he was starting to talk about some, government bulletins that were warning about 60 knots that were coming up from New Zealand when I was already approaching Cape Horn. So you knew then already, okay, there's a big system coming up behind. And then we got warning from race control saying, there is a big system coming up behind. You should take evasive action now if you want to get away from it. So that's what I did. I went onto a course that would get me going as far north as fast as possible. Preparing for a storm isn't a 10-minute job, and it's also pretty difficult to do if you start when the storm has already arrived. So if you want to start preparing in 35, 40 knots, perhaps in the dark and in the rain, it's not going to be a lot of fun. But it's very interesting because just before that warning came through, I'd broken one of my spinnaker poles, and I was devastated about it because just before I broke the pole, that was the week I was beating all the records for best 24 hours, best 7-day speeds and all that kind of thing. And it was sailing with my double twin Yankee rig there and 2 poles. And then the spinnaker pole broke, not even in strong conditions, but it just broke because it was kind of on its way out. And because it broke, I landed up going much slower and on a course far more to the east and southeast than I wanted to. And it was the greatest blessing in disguise, because I would have been rushing towards maybe being right at the point of passing, of where the eye of the storm would have passed me if I had. So then it was a bit of a positive reminder not to get too upset about things that are going wrong sometimes, because they might be blessings in disguise. And then I went as far north as I could. At that point, I didn't either care anymore. It's like, yeah, I'm still racing, but I don't want to risk breakage. And then by the time the storm came through, I was prepared. I deployed my warp long before the storm actually set in. So when it came through, I was feeling very comfortable and very at ease.
What was the actual storm like when it hit? Were you inside with everything sort of buttoned up? How did you spend your time?
I was inside for a lot of the time, but I also did go outside quite frequently. And there were big waves coming over the stern and filling the cockpit, and sometimes, hitting, like, I didn't at first lock the companionway because I thought it's such a heavy hatch. It's not going to really be necessary, but the waves were so big and powerful, they were actually whacking the hatch open. On one occasion, a big wave hit the Wattency hydro generator with its bracket. It cracked the brackets. So I needed to pull that in overboard, and at another point it caused the hydrovane rudder to rotate on its shaft. It was such a powerful wave, so the boat was trying to turn to windward. So at that point I also had to intervene on the stern and realign the rudder and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, the boat was holding her course very well, especially with the hydrovane steering and the warp keeping her stern to the seas. And it was comfortable. So, other than the big waves crashing over the stern every now and again and wetting a few things, I felt like it's okay, we're all right. There might be a bit of breakage on the brackets and stuff like that of the Wattency, but it's nothing that's going to cripple us or cause us to have to abandon the race.
And I know that I think one decision you made before starting the race, because there's always the balance between having a lot of spares in case something goes wrong, but then balanced with the added weight of those spares in a racing environment. But I think you mostly went for having more spares and not minding too much about the weight. I'm going to guess that you were probably happy with that decision, or what would you say about that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I probably still had more spares than I needed to, but it's one of those Murphy law things, you know. But you know, like even when the hydro generator bracket broke, I had all the spares I needed, down to, you know, being able to cut threads, and I had, you know, like pieces of brass sheet that the boat came with, and I just thought I'd just leave them on board because you never know when you might need them. And they all came in handy, that I could, you know, with the hacksaw cut little pieces of this brass sheet and then tack holes into it and drill and tap and all sorts of things, so that I could make a flush mounting so that my hydro generator could still swivel and I could keep using it. Because if I hadn't been able to use it at all anymore for the rest of the stretch, I wouldn't have been able to generate electricity, and I would have probably landed up motoring to generate electricity, and then I would have probably got penalties for it at some stage. So, you know, all those things that I had on board were good.
Well, and that's also, I guess, the benefit of a heavier displacement boat, that you can carry these things without too much of a loss in performance.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, every choice you make in boats is going to be a bit of a toss-up somewhere. And I'm sure I did struggle a little bit more in the lighter winds, having the heavier displacement boat. And it's just up to you to decide what's going to be the most important for you.
Absolutely. Well, and you did end up winning the race, Kirsten, so I reckon you probably hit a good compromise.
And lady luck on my side, man.
It's New Year's Eve, last day of 22. 22's been a pretty good year, and let's hope that 23 will bring many good things as well. It's pretty special to be out here. There's Cape Horn. Just there. There we have it. Pretty exciting moment.
It was a lovely feeling because I was aiming to find the islands of Diego Ramirez, and I did, and I found them almost spot on. I was approaching them at night, and I was expecting to see the lighthouse, but I didn't see the lighthouse. But come morning, I was scrutinizing the horizon, and there I saw it, because there were lots of squalls passing the whole time, and I think a squall just passed, and as it cleared, I saw the island. So I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. Now I know where Diego Ramirez is. Then I altered course to get as close to the island as possible, because from there I was going to put myself onto a bearing leading me straight towards the Horn. And then the weather was nice. It was squally, so it was coming through sometimes 30, 35 knots. So I was doing lots of reefing and unreefing, but it was just fun kind of sailing. And every now and again there'd be some sleet and some hail and a little bit of snow. So it was a bit cold and gnarly. But for Cape Horn standards, it's like this is the dream conditions to be passing the Horn. And I altered course to actually pass it quite close by. And then I hailed the watchkeeper of the Cape Horn lighthouse, and he answered. And that was a moment of great joy. It's like, yeah, he's talking to me, he's answered me. He knew who I was, which really amazed me. I didn't think he'd know who I was, but he's like, I've been following the race. And it was funny at one point, because I said, I think I've been at sea for however many days. I can't remember what number I gave him. And he said, no, you're exaggerating now. That's one day more than you have been at sea, because the website says it's only been so and so many days. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And he's really been following, and he was so nice. He was so encouraging. He's like, it's fantastic. I'm rooting for you. You're the first one to pass the Horn. He said, and it's great. You know, can you imagine how inspired all of the women are out there watching you pass the Horn, and you go for it. And it was a lovely moment. It was really a fantastic moment.
That's incredibly beautiful, Kirsten. I have to bring up the contrast of your somewhat famous texts, because I think your media team put out, it was absolutely hilarious, sort of like a meme style little graphic I think I saw on Instagram or something of all these headlines: Kirsten, number whatever woman to go solo around Cape Horn, leading the pack in the GGR, all these records that you had broken. And then I think they put, what does Kirsten have to say about all this? And it was one of your famous texts that just said, all good, Kay. And it was absolutely hilarious.
And we went like that because I was thinking, well, it's a bit of a special occasion today. Should I send a bit more of a text? And then I thought, nah, I've got way too much stuff to enjoy right now in the present that sits around with my sat phone and, press little buttons 50 million times until you've got the right word and all that. So it's like, all good, okay, let's keep going.
I love it. I feel like that really defined you as a sailor, and almost more in line with the sort of old Bernard Moitessier mentality of, I'm really here for the sailing, and of course, you're absolutely lovely to talk to and so effusive after the fact, but during the moment, you were there in the present, and I think there's really a lot to be said for that as well.
And I wanted to be able to do it as much Moitessier style. If I had it my way, I might not even have wanted to have a radio on board, to be honest. So the fact that we had these obligations was like, well, okay, I'm just going to do the bare minimum for it because it doesn't really fit into my view of what this should be like. Photo gates were actually more true to the 1968 because a lot of those sailors did specifically approach land so that they could make contact with someone and just say, hey, I'm still here and I'm still around. Can you please post a letter for me or something like that? So in that sense, I actually preferred the photo gates towards the sat phone communication.
So how did you feel about that final stretch? Were you also feeling like now we're, homeward bound, or did you still sort of?
I started to develop a bit of a sense of nostalgia from that point onward, from having passed the Horn. The first thing after that was passing the Falkland Islands, and that was a great motivation because I specifically wanted to pass Port Stanley really close because I knew I hadn't spoken to the Falkland Islanders in years, but I knew that if I passed close by, they'd come out and wave to me. And it was a real motivation, and it was fun because I went much closer inshore than I would otherwise have because, obviously the islands and other hazards that you have to watch out for when you're sailing so close inshore without a GPS. They communicated with me and they said, are you coming close inshore? Because if you are, we'll come out with the launch to wave to you. So that was another great moment it was like my own private little photo gate, if I can call it that. After the Falklands, I started to become a little bit worried because I suddenly felt like now I'm in unknown territory in that I hadn't sailed that stretch from the Falklands up to Europe ever before. I'd sailed Falklands over to South Africa, but not Falklands up to the equator. And it was at that point when I started consulting Ocean Passages for the World to read what the suggested route was, because on the one hand, I didn't want to get into the strong northwesterlies coming off the depressions that, come up from the Horn. So I wanted to go east for that reason, to get away from the northwesterlies. But on the other hand, I didn't want to go too far east because I didn't know what it would be like crossing the doldrums. Because as a rule of thumb, the further west you are, the less likely the doldrums are to be very wide. But then I thought, well, I've read where Moitessier crossed the doldrums back in the day when he did Tahiti, Alicante, and I read what the Ocean Passages of the World had to say, and I followed their suggested track. But in the back of my mind, I always had some doubt about, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? But there was no way to know. There was just absolutely zero weather information. And maybe this would have helped me for the races over the years leading up to the race if I'd always studied that particular stretch. That's one thing I would have done in hindsight. But in the moment, I just didn't know. And the only thing I could go on was the literature.
So how did it work out for you?
I'm still not 100% sure because I still haven't looked at all the historical weather and my track as I was passing through, which is something I'd like to do at some stage. But at first it was going really well. But Don on the weekly calls, he kept on asking me, why are you going east? Why are you going east? And because I already was doubting that going east, it made me doubt even more. And then someone from the media also said, what's your strategy for going east? Why are you going so far off the ram line? And then I really started to doubt myself. And at that point, which I was really frustrated about, I felt like I shouldn't be in communication with anyone. I shouldn't even know where, I shouldn't even be doubting myself at all. I should just be out there and saying, this is the choice I've made and I'm going to stick to it and not be worried about it. And shouldn't I? But the point is I did. And I stopped going east and I started going due north. And then I sailed into what was probably a little low that inconvenienced me for a couple of days. And then I got out of that, but I'd lost a couple of days, but then I got into the doldrums well south of the equator. And then I realized something's wrong here. The doldrums are very wide. And then I started to get very worried about how long is this going to take for me to get out. And again, you're sitting without any weather information. So you don't know how long it's going to take. And that's when my mood started seriously shifting to becoming negative and thinking I was doing so well. I was leading around the horn and now it's slipping like grains of sand through my finger. And there's nothing I can do to change the situation I'm in right now. So mentally, it was really trying. It was probably the most trying of the whole race. And it's a far more tactical stretch than the Southern Ocean, because the Southern Ocean, you're going to stay as close as you can to the southern limits and you're going to try and avoid storms. But you kind of got a good understanding of what's happening. But when you're going through the doldrums and the horse latitudes and all that kind of thing, there are a lot of errors you can make that are going to get you stuck. And especially because it's the last leg, you're like a horse running to the stable. You don't want to be held back anymore, but you also don't want to be held back anymore because you don't have still 2/3 of the world to catch up on other competitors. Now the gap's closing and there's not much time to change it anymore.
So did you know your position?
I didn't. I knew in all likelihood that Simon was ahead of me. But I didn't know where Abalash was. So the last, from the Azores onwards, when I knew I'd got away from the horse latitudes and, that I should expect some good wind, I was pushing the boat as hard as I possibly could. Because after having lost all that time in the doldrums, I thought it's now or never. So I was really making it go as fast as it possibly seemed feasible to do. And it was fun. It was really fun sailing. It was really competitive, fun sailing, kept me on my toes, and I was really enjoying it. And I was kind of almost getting sad thinking, because you realize you're getting back into shipping lanes and civilization and everything, and you realize you're nearing the end of what's been a really amazing adventure. And I was obviously happy, but I was also feeling a little bit sad. This has been a whole lifestyle, and my life is about to change very, very dramatically. I was in a fog bank for a number of days, probably the best part of 4 days. And I sailed out of the fog bank very close to Les Sables d'Olonne. And as I sailed out of the fog, the wind died away as well. And I could see Les Sables d'Olonne, which was good because at that point I wasn't sure where I was exactly. And then I saw a boat with a blue spinnaker, and I thought it might very well be Abalash. And I thought he's going to beat me now because he's going to do better in the light winds. But then it just turned out to be some random boat. So up until that point, I really didn't know. Even beyond that, I didn't know if he was in port ahead of me or if he was still behind me.
A passé la ligne d'arrivée de la Golden Globe Race 2022. Elle n'est pas juste la première sud-africaine à faire cela. Elle n'est pas juste une femme qui fait un exploit. Elle n'est pas juste la première femme dans l'histoire de la navigation à finir en tête d'une course, un tour du monde à la voile, non seulement en solo, elle est solo, sans assistance et sans escale, à l'ancienne en plus, mais même solo ou en équipage, c'est la première femme dans l'histoire de la navigation à faire cet énorme exploit qui est Kirsten Neuschäfer. Nous ne la connaissions pas avant, pourtant c'est un énorme marin qui a 250 000 à bord. Et je laisse la saluer.
Great. Yeah, fantastic, eh?
boats came out and they started talking to me. And then one of them said, hey, you're the winner. And I'm like, are you sure? And I was like, should I believe them or shouldn't I? And they're like, yeah, you're the winner. Like Simon pulled in, however many hours ahead of you this morning, but he's in Chichester class, so you're the winner of the Golden Globe. And I'm like, and Avalash hasn't arrived yet. They're like, no, Avalash is behind you. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm on the one. And I'm like, well, that's a bit disappointing. I wish I'd gotten there before Simon, but on the other hand, it's still not a bad going, So, and then I realized, because up until that point, I was still trying to err on the side of anticipation management and just expect that I hadn't won. So I was kind of a little bit disappointed in my mind. It's like, rather get there feeling disappointed, because in all likelihood, you wouldn't have won. And when it started to sink into my head, I started feeling really happy. I'm like, yeah, that's actually quite cool. Okay, maybe this is true. Maybe this is what's happened. And and then, things just built up to, whatever they were going to build up to the passing of the finish line. But yeah.
Kirsten Neuschäfer won the Golden Globe race. She is the first South African sailor to win any around-the-world sailing race and the first woman to win an around-the-world sailing race via the Three Great Capes. She set all the fleet records for speed, she rescued a fellow contestant at sea, she weathered incredible storms in the Southern Ocean, and she did it all with her characteristic calm humility. Kirsten Neuschäfer has firmly cemented herself as one of sailing's great icons.
It was really amazing feeling that was building up slowly to, all these faces and the fact that I was about to win. And yeah, it's probably once in a lifetime sort of moment. It still makes me really happy when I think about it. With a huge eye, because I obviously knew that people like my mother and my friends, and especially people like Eddie and Darren, the Prince Edward Islanders, were following me. But you sometimes forget to what extent, and also to what extent people who didn't know you were following you and cheering you on. And, I ask sometimes, because I'm sure it had a massive effect on me, even if I wasn't consciously, telepathically hearing them cheer me on. But the fact that there were so many people out there wanting me to succeed, it's really touching, and it's very humbling, because, I was doing something to fulfill my own desire for adventure and challenge and everything else. I mean, I was really doing a very individualistic thing. You could even say borderline, or maybe not even borderline, but almost selfish thing of wanting to live my dream. And yet there were so many people who were cheering me on and telling me afterwards that it was inspiring, which in turn inspired me. It's like, okay, you're allowed to follow your dreams. And they've just made it so much more amazing for me as well, I guess, again, it was one of those moments where there was so much happening that you don't really have time to think.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember thinking, I have to get my boat ship shape. There are lines all over, and I don't like the fender height, and we've left stuff lying on the deck, but there was no time to, because you get whipped off your boats and up onto the stage, and then there are people around, and then you're talking to people, and then you land up spreading yourself quite thin, because a lot of people have traveled from places like South Africa and Prince Edward Island and stuff to see you, and other places as well. And you want to spend a bit of time with all of those friends for having come so far to see you in. So you spread yourself thin. And at the end of it, I must say, I did feel quite exhausted just by all the media attention, by all the multitude of people that wanted to spend time with me. I hardly had time to spend with my friends. And then one of the first things that happened to me as well was that I got COVID. Fortunately, a mild sort of strain of COVID. And I almost half expected it, because I thought I've been in such a clean environment for 8 months with absolutely no contact to other humans. So my immunity is not going to be used to suddenly having lots of people in close proximity to me. So yeah, it was quite a big transition. And there were moments when I just wished I could just concentrate on Minnehaha and get a nice and ship shape and do what I would have, as a seafarer, would just pay attention to my boat, and cut out all the other stuff in the background.
After such a massive journey, how do you think it changed you as a person?
It's hard to say. Again, I haven't really had as much time as I would have liked to have to reflect on it. But I'm sure it has changed me. I just can't pinpoint how exactly. And one of the questions that goes through my mind constantly is how to deal with the huge success, and how to channel the success and everything that comes with the success, like all the opportunities that might open up to me, all the interest that people have taken, all the desire that there is from other people for me to share my story, all the questions of what's next. It's like, well, how do I channel it all? Because I really, what I need to do, and I haven't yet done it, but is I need to digest the whole experience. And at the moment, I'm working on my boat, just a general maintenance. And as boats always are, you always find more and more and more. So now I've gone down this rabbit hole of tinkering forever and a day here on Minnehaha when I'd actually like to be sailing her. But it's also part of digesting the experience. It's like, I'm back to working on maintenance and port to refitting the boat. For me, it's like a way to say my final thanks to the boat rather than just flog her off as she was and say, well, here's the boat for sale now. Whoever else can come and deal with all those little minor maintenance issues. It's not my problem anymore, but I can't do that. I just, I have to do this as a last way to pay homage to the boat. Yeah, and how it's changed me, I'm still not sure yet. I'm sure it's going to be one of those experiences in life that's so big that you'll keep learning from it even years to come. When you think back of it, you're like, oh, yeah, I did say that. Oh, yes, I did meet that person. Oh, yes, I did deal with this situation in that manner at the time when it was happening. So, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it will be a slowly unfurling sort of list of realizations, absolutely. So you are going to sell Minnehaha. Is that what's going to happen?
That's really what should be happening. But the way I'm working on her now, I almost, if I must be really honest, yeah, I must sell her. And I keep on saying I must and I will sell her, which is in all likelihood true. But every time someone says, well, is she for sale? Then I kind of get half and half irritated. That's it. I think this is my home. So yeah, I mean, that is the plan. That is the plan. I just have to, maybe it's one of the challenges that comes with the race is to practice non-attachment at some point and say, I have to let her go now. But I'm just not ready to let go of her right now because I want her to be 100% shipshape that I can pass her on to whoever the next person is going to be with pride and say, I've done everything the way I would have if I was going to keep her for the rest of my life.
And I know you've inspired a huge amount of people around the globe, and I think perhaps cemented yourself as one of history's legendary sailors at this point. So it's a pretty massive thing that you've done. And Kirsten, it's just always really a joy to talk to you because you are able to describe things so beautifully and you are so kind with your time and you're just a really remarkable person. So thank you for talking with me both before and after the race. It's really a privilege.
Oh, thanks, Maya. It's been real fun talking to you as well. And again, thanks for your interest and also all your support and stuff before the race. It went a long way.
Like with the first episode, all the proceeds generated from this video will be donated to Kirsten, and I will include a link to her GoFundMe if anyone watching would like to help support her. Sailing around the world is not an inexpensive endeavor, and Kirsten is still dealing with debt from getting the boat up to the task. For now, whatever is next for Kirsten, both Aladino and I wish her all the best, and we thank her so much for the inspiration she has provided to us and thousands of others. To watch more of our videos and see our Cape George 36 refit, you can watch more on our channel right here on YouTube. Just search for Sailing Magic Carpet. As always, thank you to our patrons for making all of our video productions possible, and we will be back next Friday, as always, with a new video. That's all for now.